My name is Dale Tesmond, and I just traveled to the Galapagos Islands because my wife and I are really good at saying yes.
Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. We appreciate you joining us and listening to our conversation about finding your purpose in retirement.
Hello, I'm Adam Kalimba, and I'm here again with my friends Curt and Dale. Guys, how's it going?
I'm doing really well. Very excited about today's conversation because we get to hear from our own Dale Tesmond today. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Our own, the one and only Dale Tesmond.
And I'm just back from the Galapagos Islands, so I'm still got that glow of vacation.
He is very glowing.
He's glowing. Yes. Yeah. I still have a little bit of that and just dying to do more, but Let's continue.
All right. So as it relates to traveling, would you guys say that you are a planned vacationer, traveler, or spontaneous? How about you, Curt?
Well, as always, I have two different answers. But back in the day when I was a planning guy, I was always planning everything down to the last minute. And I always wanted to be the guy to just like walk up into an airport and look at the board and say, oh, let's go there and buy the ticket and jump on it and see what happens.
Did you ever do that once in your life?
No. But I talked to my son who loves to travel, and he planned a trip to, I forgot it was, maybe it was Costa Rica. So I started asking him all the questions like, Ryan, so when you get there, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to get a car. And then where are you going to go? I don't know yet. Well, where are you staying? I don't know, maybe a hostel. What? And
crazy.
Yeah, and he just spontaneously did it, and I admire that in people that they can just pick up and go. I'm starting it with getting into my car and saying, maybe I'll go to Blue Ash.
Right. So, wow.
What about you?
Well,
I probably have three answers to that because, I was in college. I remember just jumping on a plane to Colorado and bouncing from ski slope to ski slope and, finding a place to stay. That was a long time ago. So I can honestly say I aspire. My son's mother and father-in-law do it all the time. They take a flight but they'll go to Panama, they'll go to Africa without a plan, and they make it up, and they send me little pictures of them in their car on a raft crossing a river in Africa saying, hey, it only cost us 10 cents. And I was just amazed by the fact that this is how they did trips. My wife's a planner. She really loves to have a plan. And that's why I'm tethered to her for life, because she's the one that keeps the rudder in the water for us. And, she's always been a great planner. So up until yesterday, she's been planning everything. Yesterday, I got to start planning my first trip that I hadn't been able to do before. So.
What about you, Adam?
I don't think I neatly fall into either exclusively a spontaneous traveler nor a planner. I do enjoy some spontaneity. Hey, let's pick up and go to whatever. And as soon as we can do that, like if the moment hits us and we're off, is really fun. I do enjoy that. I do enjoy planning things out and getting some concerns identified and rectified. But I don't like the idea of planning things meticulously. I like the idea of saying, okay, well, here are our three quality dinner options. We'll find a night to do these three dinners. But no, the idea of planning what we're going to do at 10 a.m. on a given day, every day, is not my speed.
I totally agree with that. And I've learned that the hard way, that I had everything. We're going to this tour, and then we're going to hit this tour, and then we're going to go this place, and then we're going to drive here and go this. And in the end of the day, A, you're exhausted. And B, once you found something that you really wanted to explore further, you didn't have time to do it. Mm-hmm. So I have been changing myself to being that, but I'm still the guy that makes sure that I have an airfare reservation or a rental car or a hotel to go to, as opposed to just say, well, we'll find one along the way. I got to work on that.
Not if you have to use your passport. I'm not doing that. It's one thing if I'm cruising down the highway and think I'll stay here, but not.
It's kind of hitting me, though, that isn't this an analogy for our redirection? Because I'm now looking at the time that I have to be flexible. I used to have to plan everything because you're working all the time and you've got moments to fit things into. Now you don't have that as much anymore. You have the opportunity to be flexible. to have those all of a sudden, hey, wake up one morning, it would be really fun to go do this. Think of yourself at the airport trying to pick a place to go to. Yeah. Isn't that kind of your day now? You now have the flexibility and the time, and for me, what I'm experiencing, I've got friends that are recommending, boy, if you're going to go to Alaska, make sure you do this, this, and this from people who I really trust. And they're telling me, here's some options for you. I got options.
Yeah.
So this is all lead up to the guest bio that you're going to read in for us.
Exactly.
Curt.
And we all know Dale. He's a part of our team, a member of the Redirect podcast, a very dear friend and co-host. Dale is leaning into his next 30, which was announced on LinkedIn before he was running off to the Galapagos Islands. Dale, the Galapagos Islands, that seems so distant to me in my world. And to see things like turtles, iguanas, sharks, don't forget the blue-footed booby. And then obviously to have the opportunity to spend time with friends and just seeing things that you just don't see in the good old US of A. Gosh, tell me, what was it like? And it was probably your first vacation since announcing you leaving the work.
So for the listeners who aren't following Dale on LinkedIn yet, Dale is officially retired.
The day has come.
It is not here. It was just a little while ago.
He's now welcome to my club.
Wow, I'm in shock because that's probably the first time anybody's looked at me and said, "Now you're retired."
We are.
I've been talking really about this as my next 30. Because I was part of a group that was meeting quarterly, a bunch of CEOs, actually people who ran their own businesses. And coming out of that, we all talked about, we're never going to retire. We're just going to do our next 30. And I keep saying that I'm doing my next 30. I'm still consulting with the company that I had sold, feel still part of their family. I am now doing the Redirect podcast, playing golf. I am being a grandfather. I am
jet setting off to the Galapagos.
And the opportunity to go to Galapagos. Yes, Galapagos, it's very far away. I've always thought about Galapagos as a place where I'm going to get to see God's beauty, kind of untouched by humans. And to go that far, it's still in our time zone, but many, many hours of flights to go down to Quito, Ecuador, and then you fly from Quito, Ecuador, 700 miles west to the Galapagos Islands, and you land on these little lava fields. And you look at the ocean, and you are this little tiny bit. You're a scratch in this gigantic ocean, the Pacific Ocean. You get a sense of how small you are, yet when you look into the water, you see this paradise of God's creation that I would never get to see anywhere else. And first day, out of the boat, into the water, snorkeling, and to my right is a 5-foot black-tip shark. Shouldn't I be fearful of that? No, it doesn't want me, doesn't care about me. Manta rays. Fascinating, beautiful fish living their life in the present. What can I learn from that?
So, Dale, and I hope you tell me that this is the real case. I know the Galapagos Islands, it's like a park and such, but all the things you just described, I have never been there. I went to Hawaii. So I'm in the water too, and I'm seeing some beautiful things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is paradise. This is God's creation. And then I pop my head up out of the water, and then I see all these high-rises with condominiums and cars, and I'm really not out there. Tell me that the Galapagos is just this.
Not over-commercialized.
Well, not commercialized at all.
Right.
I don't want to see a McDonald's there. I just want to see God's creation in its rawest form with turtles that are over 100 years old and iguanas that are 4 feet long and sharks that are just beautiful. And birds you can't even see unless you look in a book, like the blue-footed booby,
Guys, this might be a good chance to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey there, if you're enjoying this episode, we've got a small favor to ask. Actually, it's a big favor. Take a moment to like and share this podcast with your friends and family. then follow the Redirect Podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's quick, it's free, and it helps us keep bringing you great content every week. If you really want to make a difference, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews help us spread the word and keep this community growing. So hit that follow button, share with a friend, and let us know what you think. We appreciate you more than you know. Now let's get back at it. The Galapagos Islands is 97.5% a national park.
Oh, wow.
But Ecuador really is the sponsor. But there are people whose job it is to enforce all of the protections around this island. You cannot go anywhere without the park system really knowing where you are. I asked the people who I went on the trip with, the company called Wilderness Travel, who I've gone on many trips with, and they find the company and the guide. The National Park System hands out itineraries that the boats buy and sell to travel companies. So you are on an itinerary that's set by the National Park System because they're going to limit the number of people to an area at a given time to 100 people or less.
Gosh, how fortunate you are to
just
be able to experience
protected,
that.
unlike any other protection. And, and you can see why. Once you're there, you're seeing these saddleback turtles everywhere. They're all living their life and reproducing, and for hundreds of millions of years this has been going on. And you're standing on what took years for people to discover. Because they're out in the doldrums on the equator somewhere, they run into these islands, and then you have Charles Darwin ends up there doing his research, and then all of a sudden you see slowly but surely people starting to show up, and they know they needed to protect it. So, yeah, this is kind of as close to paradise as I could imagine.
How did you decide to go there?
Well, Fran, my wife, and I are really good at saying yes. My friend Mike Gosling, who is going to be a friend of Redirect in a couple episodes, said, "I'd love to celebrate your 70th birthday with you. Will you consider going to the Galapagos Islands?" And it's real easy for us to say yes. When somebody else has identified the trip and the itinerary is set, talk about planning.
Yeah, was that the day before?
All set.
Was that the day before?
No, it was 6 months before.
Okay, so you're planning.
So we had something to look forward to for 6 months.
Yeah.
So, honestly, I'm really, really excited about having the opportunity to actually start planning stuff for ourselves and having the time to do that.
So you planned this trip 6 months ago.
Yep.
That was while you were still working and hadn't really considered a date for retirement yet. So,
but didn't that all fall in line?
Yeah,
nicely?
so that's what I want to pounce on.
Turning 70.
Retiring, going to the Galapagos.
Well, redirecting. We like to
My apologies.
ourselves redirection. And the Galapagos Islands in January. By the way, the best time to go. It gets very hot in March. Don't go there in March.
Did you have any deep contemplation, any moments of enlightenment, any ethereal moments like, hey, I just left my previous 30. Here I am in paradise. I'm in my next honeymoon phase, and this is all my time now. I'm redirecting, and I'm starting my next 30 possibly now.
I had a moment, yes. I had a moment walking on a lava field, knowing that lava field's been there for millions of years. And I saw this little cactus starting to grow. It takes years and years and years for things to start growing in a lava field. But something floats through the air, something lands, something starts growing and germinates. And all of a sudden, here's this cactus. I'm sure it's called a Galapagos cactus because everything kind of had a Galapagos in front of it, Galapagos shark, etc. But the feeling of being small, I mean, just being out on the ocean, as I mentioned before, I don't think I prayed to God as much as I ever have on this trip, because there are just moments of you realizing just how small you are. We're on this boat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, traveling 57 miles to the first island where we're going to go through the cross currents. And I'm sure people over the years have always prayed to God a lot on boats when you're in the middle of a storm or whatever. I just constantly was present to God, present to nature, and present to the fact of how small and temporary we are. Mm-hmm. In reality, we've got to celebrate the being. We got to celebrate where we are. We got to celebrate being present. That's the hardest thing, I think, for people, because remember, this is my first vacation I got to go on, or adventure I got to go on, not really worrying about what's going to face me when I return the next day, return to work. So all of a sudden that comes back to, wow, it's really about me and not my career. It's really about me being present, walking on this lava field, celebrating God's nature, celebrating the fact that we have this opportunity to be witness to something as pure as the Galapagos Islands. There were a lot of moments, but I celebrated the joy of having the opportunity to do it, taking the opportunity to do it. A big part of who I am is adventure, and I realized that again. I came back, all the synapses in my brains were firing because you'd stepped out. You did something different. You did an adventure. You did something big. You've got to do that, I think, in your redirected life. You've got to do stuff. I've always celebrated doing it. I'm a risk taker. It's part of who I am. I love taking those risks. And you realize this later on in life. In order to do things, you got to make them happen. You got to plan that vacation because you might not take it unless you do it.
And it doesn't have to be the Galapagos Islands. This could be going up to Michigan and just working the coastline of Lake Michigan, or seeing the dunes up north, and just getting out there and exploring and putting yourself in a place where you're not necessarily used to being, and keeping your eyes wide open.
And no matter how big or small that risk might be, but I caught some inspiration from that, Dale. The notion of being invigorated, redirected, repurposed by risk. Get off the couch, get moving, do something, take a risk, push yourself out there, and watch what happens. And the energy you brought back sounds really rich.
It was fascinating. On the plane back, I watched a little series that was all about the brain, the prefrontal cortex. It went through the neuroscience of what they called super brain people, who were 80 years old and had the brains of a 30-year-old. And the only difference they could find out is they constantly stimulated their brain with learning, having the opportunity to really step out and do some different things. But it stimulated the brain. And the brain's the only part of your body that can get younger.
It can grow.
It can grow. You know, where the rest of you is going to fall apart. I got a 93-year-old mom in Chicago, you know, who I talked to yesterday, was just fired up because she had such a great day. There are a lot of things she did. And she's as sharp as a tack. She gambles, she plays cards, she's as competitive as I am. That's kind of where I got it, you know. But I'm convinced that the stimulation that she steps out and she says, Dale, a lot of people don't do this. You've got to, if you want to stay alive.
So if you recall, guys, we had a conversation on 5 stages of retirement, and you sort of gave us a little story there of a honeymoon period that you
Yes.
had, with celebration of leaving work, celebration of 70 years of life, and celebration of being with great friends, and celebration of seeing a place that is just touched by God. And now you're on the airplane as you talked, and then you get home. What was the next day like for you?
I think in the period of 1 week, I went through 3 stages of retirement. Look, I was on a honeymoon.
Yeah.
I kind of, maybe even 4, because I was in the pre-redirection period.
Yeah.
In December. In January, I go on this honeymoon trip for my 70th birthday to Galapagos. And on the Tuesday morning, I woke up, got in at 2 in the morning on a Monday night, woke up Tuesday morning, and it's 35 degrees and cloudy, and just about as dreary as we know Cincinnati winters can be. So all of a sudden, it is a disorientation period. All of a sudden, I've gone from honeymoon to disorientation, going, wow, okay, I got to get busy. I have all these things kind of that I want to do. And by the way, even with Hyperquake, we had a couple meetings set up to continue to do some business. And all of a sudden, it was a choice of going back to, wait a second, reset you. What's your plan? things that I really had set out to want to do versus just doing and filling my schedule with, oh my gosh, I just got to get busy because I got to get out of this disorientation. And without sitting back and going, oh, time out. Let's get that overall.
Who am I? Who do I want to be? Am I right?
It's easy to fall back into what I used to do because I still can.
Totally can.
But I got to force myself to maintain who I want to be as opposed to what I was.
Exactly. And that was a 4-day period.
Wow.
So I think one of the lessons here is that as you do kind of go through and develop your plan oriented to stability, we want to jump to stability because all of a sudden, you know what? It hit me this week what that is, Curt, because you've talked about stability, which is the 5th stage. And all of a sudden, I'm really settled as to what I'm doing and where I'm at. So I really, honest to God, I think I did like all 5 stages in maybe a week because all of a sudden it was like, yeah, it's okay to not have to be so busy.
Yeah. There are those moments where I make a comment to my wife, Jackie, and I say, I'm happy with my own skin right now. I'm just settled. You have to experience it to understand it because as both Dale and I have been very driven individuals, that when you take that time to purposely put yourself in a down state and recognize that you're doing that, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm very happy with where I am right now.
I think there's a stigma over the word contentment, that if you're content, then you don't have enough drive, you don't have enough ambition, you don't want more or better. And I think maybe I'd like to try and flip that on its head. Contentment should be the goal. Yes, you want to drive. Yes, you want to accomplish. But I'm trying to get to a place where I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy with who I am being.
Don't be complacent.
Agreed. There is a contrast
difference.
There's a contrast between complacency and contentment. Complacency is its own animal that needs to be dealt with, but contentment is a wonderful thing. What's your take on that, Dale?
I totally agree with the words you guys are using, but for the word that I'm coming more to grips with is peace.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's coming to grips with having a peace about yourself, that as long as I know that I'm doing the things that I want to be a servant leader, I'm a spiritual storyteller has been my long-term purpose. As long as I'm doing things that kind of line up to that, what I get out of that is peace. It's a peace that God offers to us. It allows us
His purpose.
And His purpose. It's contentment, yeah. But it's this great feeling of peace that I'm not worrying about what the shareholders are thinking on Friday or at the end of the quarter. It's a peace that you're not doing a lot of things for a lot of other people that you did for all the right reasons when you did it. This is our new time of life. This is a new opportunity. It's a new redirection. And that is a work in progress, though. But now you have experience of doing your purpose, doing God's purpose, living that plan, and feeling peace. And I expect to feel that peace more than ever.
We have talked about redirecting like into your next 30, as you've classified it. You've wrapped up your previous 30, which is probably mostly career-oriented, right? Business-oriented, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Previous
40, actually.
Yeah. So you're migrating into your next 30. Is that has some structure materialized around that? Does that have a personality or a character yet that you can share? I mean, you could clearly define your previous 30 or 40 in career and business. What's some big high level values of the next 30?
I think what we end up talking a lot about is what made you successful in that career. When you really think and consider what were the things, the drive. I haven't lost the drive. I haven't lost the need for a hunt. I'm just on a different hunt. Those things that are really what made us successful are the things you've got to get back in touch with and say, hey, how do I want to use that for my next 30? How am I going to achieve being a great grandpa? My need to be stimulated to go on adventures, holy cow, I'm going to be dragging my grandkids on adventures. My poor boys, when I drove them to school, when I was in my career, every day I challenged them, and they'll tell you this. Dad would say, oh, go have an adventure today. Do one thing. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Every day was kind of an adventure. Stuff happened.
I'm from Chicago, too.
Fights break out in the cafeteria. That was adventure.
It's when you go on an adventure that you're accustomed to and you know it, but when you bring somebody new that's going through it for the first time and you see it in their eyes, it makes that adventure, even though you've already done it, something totally different because now you're seeing it through their eyes. I love that part. When they're seeing it for the first time, and I get joy out of that.
I'm so inspired by this idea of applying the values we had from our career, taking that into our next redirection, our next 30. It doesn't have to be I'm coming out from the desk or off the ladder or whatever our career was to go sit on the couch. And if that's all you want out of life, fine. This podcast might not be ideally for you. We're trying to we're trying to
encourage you.
We're trying to encourage you to find purpose, and find meaning. And this idea of bringing all of those previous attributes to bear on your next session of life, I think is awesome.
For some ridiculous reason, I always told people that what I feared most was boredom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the person that I am. I've never been a boredom person. I've been running away from it. Maybe maybe it's reason why I go after adventures and want to take risks, but that's a part of who you are. So bring that with you. I mean, all those great things that made you successful, bring them with you into your redirection.
Yeah. Well, Dale, thank you so much for taking us on a little trip today. I'm looking forward to the invitation where we can come and I'll bring the popcorn to sit in your house and you can show all the pictures.
I'm going to bore you like I've bored a lot of other people.
No, but seriously, Dale, thank you for sharing. Thank you for just bringing something to the table in the sense of being where you are and not necessarily doing what you do. And I think you summed it up really well. Congratulations on your 70th birthday.
Indeed.
Congratulations on making the decision to join us in the redirect world.
I've sincerely enjoyed this conversation and look forward to continuing on in this adventure.
Catch you next time. We want to thank Gianna Demona and the University of Cincinnati 1819 Innovation Hub for allowing us to use the eSports recording studio to record our podcast. The Redirect podcast music is from Sound Gallery by Dimitri Terrace. Want more information on how to redirect your purpose in retirement? Check out the Redirect U website at redirect-u.com. Do you have something you want to share? Do you have a question about your redirect strategy? Please email us at info@redirect-u.com. We would like to hear from you. Check out the latest Redirect podcast episode, as well as see all the Redirect episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Remember, there is purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.